on building enduring relationships. Please join me in giving her a warm welcome.
Oh, um, can you? Yeah, thank you. Can the lights in the audience be increased? Not for me, not on me. Audience. Yeah, thank you. Not on me, please. Not this. Thank you. The subject for this evening is building relationships. We belong to a culture which was originally very wealthy. We went through the golden eras, and there's a description that the streets were lined with gold. And this is what attracted travelers from all over the world. But that's not all. We also had wonderful relationships. So in the past, we had not just large joint families where 45, 50 members of a family extended family, would live together, and the key word here is harmoniously. We had no attrition rates because generations of employees worked with generations of employers. And there was a wonderful community spirit. We had an informal welfare state. If any member of the community was doing badly, all the other members would get together and extend support to that family or to that unit to make sure that everyone did well. And of course, there was not just national consciousness, but international. We had a saying that small-minded people think this is mine, that is yours. Large-hearted people think Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. You must have heard this phrase, means the whole world, the whole universe is one family. Unfortunately, today, we are in a state where not only are there nuclear families, but there are single parents. In the US, once a lady asked me to stay with her because she had just lost her husband. And she had an 11-year-old son at school. One day she forgot some work that she had to do for his school project. And she said, "Have a heart, beta, I'm a single parent." The son turned around and said, "What are you making such a big deal of it? Most of my friends have single parents, you know?" And that's a very sad reflection on society. There are high attrition rates, and there is discord, friction, war everywhere. So what is the cause of all of this? What do you think? Sorry? Intolerance, yes. Why? Sorry? Selfishness. So all our relationships are pervaded by this selfishness, and this is referred to as attachment. So what is attachment? Attachment is not physical clinging to people. It's not a physical connection. Attachment is love plus selfishness. Oops. This seems to have a mind of its own. So this happens because of a lack of self-sufficiency. Suppose I had polio in one leg. I wouldn't be capable of standing on my own feet, and I would need a crutch. But now, fortunately, I'm more than capable of standing on my own feet. But I have the luxury of leaning against maybe this podium, maybe a wall, anything. Emotionally, it's like that. If we lack self sufficiency, then we need to reach out to people and establish relationships and depend on them, lean on them. So, if somebody were to lean on your shoulders all the time, what would you say? You'd get fed up and say, "Get off my back." And that is exactly what happens. Except that they don't say it in so many words. You know what the symptoms are? The husband tells the wife, "It's been a long time since you went to your mother's place." The wife tells the husband, "You haven't been on a business trip for long." The children tell their parents, "Why don't you go on a holiday, the two of you?" What does it all mean? Get off my back. Give me freedom. You know, this is the meaning. But we don't catch it. We don't understand it. We don't pick it up. And all this happens because we are emotionally not independent. There is a lack of self-sufficiency. And then you need a crutch and you're dependent. Now, the exact opposite of this, what Vedanta, our culture, asks us to develop is detachment. Now, detachment is true love. Detachment is not indifference. Many of us interpret it as indifference because these are the only two states we know. Most times we are indifferent to people, and the few people, the small circle that we love, we pollute it with selfishness. So we don't know what true love is. True love is unconditional love. It's what your pet dog has for you. Anyone here has a pet dog? There. Now, when you have a pet dog, he doesn't care whether you live in a 7-bedroom mansion or an ordinary apartment. He doesn't care whether you're wearing high-end shoes or ordinary shoes. He just loves you. But when it comes to human beings, it is not unconditional. It is conditional to a lot of things. So, in our relationships, because we are dependent on people, see, the starting point is all wrong. The starting point is, I am incomplete without a relationship. So, I have to form a bond with someone and then lean on that person. And then what happens? You have expectations of the person to make up for your lack of self-sufficiency. And then you make demands on the person. And when these expectations and demands are not met with, there is frustration, bitterness, conflict, quarrel. Have you ever wondered, why is it that you have conflict with the people you love most? Of course, there are the good times, right? But there are also the bad times. When the person doesn't live up to your expectations, there's conflict. Whoever it is, partner, spouse, children, parents, siblings. And this is the reason why there is conflict across the board. So, when self-sufficiency is lacking, or where there is self-sufficiency, you don't need support of people. And this is because you're independent. So, it's a wonderful thing. You're quite capable of living on your own. You don't need support from people. But you have the luxury of establishing wonderful relationships. This is true love, where you love the person for what he or she is, not for what he provides to you. And you accept the person for what he or she is. You're quite comfortable. irrespective of what faults or shortcomings the other person may have, irrespective of whether the child lives up to your expectations or not. And this is one of the worst things that we as Indians suffer from. All of us have unreasonable expectations of our children. We don't want them to be just kids. We want them to be super kids. Huh? They must excel in academics. They must be good in sport. They must be good at music. They must be, I don't know what you expect of the kids. And then you get after them, ride on their backs, put pressure on them. Our former president, Dr. Abdul Kalam, when he was president, and I was lecturing in Delhi, he invited me to Rashtrapati Bhavan. And this was a few months before his retirement. And he was telling me, I'm looking forward to my retirement. You see, he didn't lobby to get a second term. He didn't go begging to people to give him a second term. He was happy retiring. He said, I'm looking forward to my retirement. And my mission is to bring back the smile on the faces of our children. They're born happy, but we adults wipe the smile off their faces by saying, the mother says, have you done your homework? Have you studied for your exam? Why didn't you do well? He goes to school, it's the same story. The teacher hounds him. And that smile is wiped off very soon. It's such a tragedy that young kids are put under so much pressure that there are 11-year-old children who are committing suicide. And that's a sad reflection on our society. So, attachment. How do you know you're attached? Or what are the first symptoms of attachment? When the person is there, you're comfortable. And it's not as if you're interacting with the person, you're talking to the person. No, it's just the person is around, you're happy, you're comfortable. But when the person is not there, you miss the person. So, often you find that a couple goes out to a restaurant to eat. They don't talk to each other. Each one is on his own phone. But when the husband goes to Germany for a business trip, he hasn't even reached the airport, the wife messages him, I'm missing you. That's what it is. And when the person is there, it's not that you can enjoy the person's company. You're always picking on some fault. You're always saying, you don't do this for me, you don't do that for me. So there's sorrow either way. What is detachment? You enjoy the person's company thoroughly. You have a really good time with the person. And when the person is not there, you enjoy your solitude. So it's a win-win situation. Can you visualize that? That is true love. Now, how does attachment begin? How do you get attached to a person? By constant thinking. You know, you meet a person, you say, nice person. And then you keep saying, nice person, nice person, nice person. There is a stream of thoughts going from you towards that person. It could be object also. Car, home, person. Same principle works. And before long, you're attached to the person. Then you form an exclusive and restrictive relationship with the person which creates bondage. So, there are people, ladies particularly, you invite them anywhere. They'll say, I'd love to come, but my husband comes home at 5:30. So I feel like saying, let him come. He'll enjoy his solitude. He'll enjoy the fact that he has free time. You do what you have to do. You know, when you feel restricted by a relationship, that is attachment. You feel you're not yourself. You feel you can't do what you want to do because the spouse is there, because the children are there. I'm not suggesting you should dump them and go. That's not the point. The point is, every one of us has a life to lead. Everyone has a mission, a purpose, a goal. You can't allow relationships to come in the way of your purpose, and you can't allow your relationship to come in the way of the other person's purpose also. So when you create bondage, it immobilizes you. It's like you're sitting here. Suppose you tie yourself to the chair you're sitting on. When we finish, you're unable to get up. You're bound. Detachment. So even though you feel bound, you're actually completely and totally free. You just believe. You've psyched yourself into this bondage. It's like Gulliver's Travels. You remember Gulliver's Travels, the story? Gulliver is washed ashore and he's fast asleep. And the Lilliputians come and painstakingly nail him to the ground. So they think they've got him. But the fact is, he's just asleep. And when he wakes up, he just gets up. He doesn't even feel the Lilliputians having nailed him. This is you and me. We are like Gulliver. We appear to be bound because we are asleep to our potential. We are asleep to our grandeur. We are asleep to the magnificence we have within us. When are we going to wake up? That's why the Kathopanishad says, Uttishta, get up. Jagrata, wake up, man, for how centuries you've been asleep. Prapya viran nibodhata. Until you achieve your goal, don't rest. Don't give up. And here we are, oblivious to the potential that we have, oblivious to the power that resides within us. What are we doing, wasting our time? Getting stressed out over silly, insignificant, petty things. This is the problem, friends. And when you're petty-minded, you project that onto your relationships and create conflict where there should be peace and harmony. And you stress out the other person also. It's a tragedy. So, detachment is when your thought goes on something higher. You know, Wordsworth has written a longish poem called Laodamia, and it talks about exactly this. It speaks of a time when the Greeks and the Trojans used to be at constant war with each other. And at one time, there was a prophecy that the first Greek who lands on Trojan soil will be killed. So when the the ships are about to land on Trojan soil, they're in a quandary. They don't know whom to send first. If they send an ordinary soldier, the Trojans will laugh at them for being cowards. And if they send a great warrior, they're losing a valuable soldier. So while they're debating, Protesilaus, the young Greek hero, jumps, fights valiantly, but as the prophecy goes, he's killed. And he was newly married. His wife, who was just married for 3 months, is heartbroken and prays to God to give her husband back to her. So God is pleased with her loyalty and love for the husband. So he says, okay, I'll give your husband back, but only for 3 hours. She sees his form and goes to embrace him, and her hands meet and she's again heartbroken. Obviously, he's not for real. Someone who's dead can't come alive. But his form has been sent, his spirit has been sent to teach her detachment. So her first question to him is, why did you have to jump? Did you not think of me? And he says, on thee too fondly did my memory hang. and on the joys we share in mortal life. And he continues, and that's poetry, you have to read it. And then he says, but lofty thought in act embodied, brought about by deliverance. So this lofty thought is something that should be in our minds at all time. What are you living for? What is the purpose of your birth? What do you want to achieve before you want to die? Have you ever thought of it? It can't be just you're born, you grow, you get married, you have children, you die, finish, that's it. That's what any other species does. What are you a human being for? And anyone who's fixed a higher ideal never faces dejection, never faces depression, never is low, never in a bad mood. And when your thought is on the higher, you develop what is known as inclusive love. Your love spreads to all human beings. It's not restricted to just me and mine. There's no bondage. You are free, the other person is free. See, love can exist only in an environment of freedom. You can't imprison the person and say, now you love me. Attachment is full of expectations. And these expectations have no connection with reality. Demands, and when these are not met with, you get bitter. Detachment is where there are no expectations. You just adore the person. You love the person for what he or she is. You accept the person for what he or she is. And when the faults come up, you are amused, not irritated or angry. No demands, and you're happy. So where there is attachment, the interaction itself becomes painful. See, every time you're interacting with the person, you're constantly riding on demands. What have you done for me? I told you to do this, you haven't done it. You don't care for me. You know, all this comes up. And in the end, you lose the object of attachment. So please remember this. The relationship breaks up. All relationships break up. So I'm not talking about death, please. It's just you develop a disgust for the other person. You're just waiting for the person to leave. And you don't have the guts to own up to it, not even to yourself. That's what happens. Where there is detachment, every time you meet the person, the interaction is joyful. You're constantly looking forward to meeting the person. And the relationship endures. Not only for a lifetime. In our culture, you say 7 janmas. You know, where is 7 janmas and now 7 months? When a couple gets married, 7 months later, I'm afraid to ask, how is the couple? Because you don't know whether they're still married or not. Now the question is, how to detach? How do you detach? You can't detach. You can't say, I will not think of this person. You have to get attached to something higher. What do we mean by something higher? Something not linked to, see, we are all obsessed with thought of self. I, me, myself. That's it. Beyond that, we can't think of anything else. You know, recently there's been a terrorist attack in Jammu, innocent people killed. And today I heard it's brewing, it's just getting worse there. We read it and dismiss it. How would we feel if our own, I hate to say that, family member was in that bus? Would we be able to carry on life normally? But we don't care. You see, that's the thing. Most of us are indifferent to people. What do I care? Something is happening somewhere in that Gaza Strip. Children are being killed. I don't care. Or, my child, I'm totally attached to. So there's the two extremes. What we're talking about is just increase your circle of love. And it's such a wonderful thing when you feel for people. And when you feel for people, the rewards are enormous. And we'll come to that. So, when the mind is greater than the intellect, you get attached. What we mean by the mind is just unconscious, unaware thought flow. The mind is the realm of feelings, emotions, impulse, likes and dislikes. Irrational. So when the mind by itself goes towards an object or being, you get attached. But when there is awareness, when the intellect comes into play, the intellect is that which reasons, discriminates, judges, weighs the pros and cons, and arrives at a decision. It's conscious, rational thought flow. When the intellect is greater than the mind, only then can you be detached. Therefore, use the intellect. Now, emotions. First step is be aware of your emotions. And when you're aware, you'll realize how many of our emotions are negative. You look at your neighbor in his garden, and how do you feel about the neighbor? You're not aware. You may be negative towards the neighbor. So when you're aware, when you use your intellect, you spot negativity. Then trace the cause. Why am I negative towards the person? And substitute them with positive emotions. Just put yourself in the other person's place. Feel for the person. Here is a person who's perhaps lonely. Here is a person who's maybe just lost his wife. He's had problems. Whatever it is. And then you develop positive emotions. And you know what? Then you win in life. There's a movie called Philadelphia. It's about a young lawyer who's fighting his own boss in court. Both lawyers fighting. And he feels negative towards the boss is obviously negative towards him. And one day before his lawyer is going to put him on the witness stand, something changes in him. He thinks of all the good times he's had with the boss. He looks at things from the boss's point of view. And all that hatred and negativity changes to understanding, compassion, consideration, acceptance of his own faults. And what triggers this is he's listening to classical music. Music has this ability to transform your emotions from negative to positive, which is why we recommend you're listening to music, So his lawyer comes, and this guy turns up the volume of the music and asks him, have you heard this? Have you listened to this? The lawyer picks up his files and says, you don't need my help. And the next day, he puts him on the witness stand. He answers truthfully, objectively, without hatred. And guess what? He wins the case. So this is it, friends. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita tells Arjuna, fight Duryodhana by all means, but don't hate him. So remember one thing, you must fight the trait, not the person. And fight only when necessary. There's a black man in America who told his son, the white man has done a lot of injustice to us, but never hate him. Because when you hate, it won't do the other person any harm, but it sure as hell will kill you. And this is the truth. When you entertain negative feelings towards a person, your mind gets agitated, you become handicapped because you can't think clearly, you can't act properly, and you suffer. Why should you suffer for someone else's wrongdoing? Do you get it? Granted, the other person has done wrong. Why should you suffer? It's like, I'm standing here, you fall down and break your leg. I mean, your leg should break. Instead, my leg breaks. Is there any justice to it? You know? So remember this. Don't ever hate anyone. Don't ever entertain negative thoughts, especially towards your own loved ones. Never. You know, there's his name eludes me just now, Dr. Wayne Dyer. He was brought up by a single parent, his mother. And he heard that his father was an alcoholic and deserted the family and went away. He was too young. But he only heard stories about his father's negativity. And he was brought up on a diet of negative feelings towards the father. Much later, many years later, he told himself, why am I hating a man that I did not even know? And by then the father had died. So he went to the father's grave and said, today I release you from my hatred. And when he came back home, he realized he hadn't released the father, he had released himself. It was a weight off his shoulders. So that's what it is. Negative feelings destroy you. Now, you may say, how can I not hate this person? He's done so much bad towards me. Let's take a look at this scenario. Do you hate a lion for its ferocity? You go all the way to South Africa to watch a lion tear a wildebeest to bits. And you enjoy that. How is it? Do you dislike a deer for its timidity? No. Why? Because you understand that ferocity is the nature of the lion and timidity is the nature of the deer. They cannot live apart from its nature, their nature. It's the same thing with human beings, friends. We are all born with a certain nature. During our life, we change our nature according to our choices. But remember one thing, just as you can't change the nature of a lion, as the saying goes, a tiger doesn't change its stripes. You can't change another human being. And the last person on earth you can change is the spouse. So don't even try that. Because you're setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment and frustration. What can you do? Whom can you change in life? Only yourself. Change your thoughts. Change your attitudes. Change the way you look at the person, and believe me, your negativity will disappear. Your hatred will go and it will be replaced by positive feelings. And then you grow. See, India and Pakistan achieved independence at the same time. Same day. Two nations were born. India moved on, didn't live in the past. Pakistan was fed on hatred, and see where the two nations are. East and West Germany, bitter towards each other, is to kill each other, fight each other. Someday, wisdom dawned on them, and they said, we are the same. And that famous Berlin Wall came crashing down. Where? Not out there in Germany, in their own minds. And what happened? A resurgent new Germany was born. This is it, friends. Similarly, with people, assess the people that you are interacting with on a regular basis, your family members, your colleagues at work, the country in which you live, the weather, the famous English weather. Assess it, don't complain about it. Accept it for what it is. Enjoy it. You know what I mean? Children are messy. In the morning, when the kids go to school, the house is neat and tidy, everything is okay. Within 5 minutes of their coming back from school, the whole house is a mess. Don't complain. That's the beauty of the children. Huh? The beauty of a teenager is his rebelliousness. A couple in Leicester was telling me, no, my children, they're devils. Both teenagers, youngsters. Anything you tell them, they have to say the opposite. I said, don't tell them. But that is the nature of teenagers. If your teenage child were to come home and be absolutely compliant, how boring life will be. Accept it. Enjoy it. Huh? The wife must say, the beauty of my husband is his irritable nature. The husband must say, the beauty of my wife is that she's a gossip monger. Enjoy it. And your attitude will change. Now, in the end, the world is a projection of your mind. There's a story from the Mahabharata that Krishna one day called Yudhishthir and said, Yudhishthir, I have a job for you. Will you please do me a favor? Yudhishthir adored Krishna and said, of course, Krishna, I'll do anything for you. So he tells him, there's one dirty work I have to do, so I need an ace crook. Yudhishthir said, of course, Krishna, I'll do anything for you. So off he went. 5 minutes later, he called Duryodhana. Duryodhana also liked Krishna, adored him. And Krishna told him, I need an honest man, God's good man. Will you find me one man like that? Duryodhana said, of course. Now both Yudhishthir and Duryodhana went around the same world at the same time. Both came back to Krishna. Yudhishthir said, I'm so sorry, Krishna, you gave me a simple job to do, but I can't find one crook in the world. Everyone is good. Duryodhana went to Krishna and said, Krishna, what to tell you? Every guy is the ace crook. I can't find one honest person. So, why is this story there? To convey to us that the world is a projection of your mind. It's true, isn't it? Doctors live in their own world, in the medical world. Artists are in a world of art. Musicians are in a world of music. You and I are in our own world. Stockbrokers are with stockbrokers. And crooks with crooks. So if you see crooks outside, please don't say it, at least not to the audience here. You know why? They'll understand who you are. So if you are not happy with the world that you live in, you can't go out there and change the world. What must you do? Change yourself, change your thoughts, change your attitudes, and by God, the world will change. This is true. Take it up as a challenge. And you know what? Pick on the person you hate most and see how you can change that. You don't need to do anything with the person. You don't necessarily need to talk to the person. Just in your mind. And see what a wonderful result comes out of it. So, find inspiration. How do you change your thoughts? Find inspiration. Most of us are at the body level. We are a generation of body worshippers. It's all about how do I look? And not even the living part of your body, the dead part, hair, nails, how much time, money, attention goes in just these things. How can you remain in the kindergarten of life all your life? When are you going to grow up? Grow into the world of emotions. Find a powerful reason to work, emotional reason. Love for your child, love for the field that you're working in. You know, there's a movie called Kaun Praveen Tambe. Have you seen it? You must see it. It's a beautiful movie based on a true story. This guy called Praveen Tambe, all he wants to do is not play test cricket, not be a hero, celebrity, just play in the Ranji Trophy. You know what Ranji Trophy is like? County cricket. And his mother introduces him to a girl, prospective bride. But he's so full of cricket, he speaks to her only about cricket. And that makes the girl fall in love with him. But that's what it is. You must love what you're doing. Love the field. Love your fellow beings. And you know what happens? You rise above physical limitations, find a new source of energy within, new dynamism, and you become successful. So there was a couple who had a handicapped child, and who couldn't walk, who couldn't speak, who couldn't do many things. But he was intelligent. So parents sent him to a normal school. One day when the other kids were running, he typed a sentence on his laptop which changed the father's life. And that sentence was, "I wish I could run." The father, who had never run, who did not like running, now started running with the boy on his back to give him the experience of running. He didn't just run, he won races. Then fix an intellectual goal. Whatever it is. And you'll perform miracles. You know how India won independence from the British? The 300 million Indians who had nothing, many of them did not even have that awareness that we should gain independence. How they managed to mobilize the country. There was no WhatsApp, there was no internet, there was no SMS, there was nothing. Just the spirit. If you have that spirit, if you're committed to something, the environment, hygiene, working for handicapped children, helping the poor, whatever it be, again you'll perform miracles. And the final thing is the spirit. The spirit has a way of asserting itself against all odds. I'll give you an example from here. In the 1930s, there was an athlete, and he was referred to as the Flying Scotsman. He was from Scotland. His name is Eric Liddell. You've heard of him? No. Find out about him. So he came from a poor family, missionary family. He didn't have the money to hire a coach or focus on his nutrition and things like that. But his philosophy was simple. He said, God made me to run, and I will run for God. And by God, what a way he ran. He used to run the 400 meters so fast that when he was asked, how do you manage that? He said, very simple. I run the first 200 meters as fast as I can. The balance 200 meters, God makes me run. Once his shoes were worn out, he didn't have money to buy new shoes. Here is an Olympic athlete who did not have money to buy shoes. He went to the trash can, picked up 2 dissimilar shoes, wore them, and still won the race. He established the Olympic record that was so difficult to break. It was years later that an Australian athlete broke his record. Now this is it. when you fix the spirit and you connect with the spirit, absolute miracles start happening. Nothing comes in your way. And mind you, not all of us are born rich. Not all of us have a high IQ. Not all of us are hugely talented. But all of us have spirit in equal measure. Tap into that. And you'll become another Eric Liddell. Not in athletics maybe, but whatever field you're in. And it could be done at any age, anywhere in the world, any person. So, when you identify with the body, you feel total separateness. You don't even feel one with your own child. Identify with the mind, and you feel one with the family. And this is the reason why all of us feel so comfortable when we go back home, isn't it? You may go out and live in 5-star comfort. Your home may be a humble one. But just the thought of going home is so fulfilling. Why? Because you feel secure within the home. Identify with the country, your intellect, and you feel one with the whole country. And identify with Atma and spirit, there's complete oneness, no separateness. And the rewards are enormous. Your happiness increases. Now, if your brother-in-law buys a Mercedes, how do you feel? Huh? Heartburn. But if your son buys a Mercedes, or your daughter buys a Mercedes, how do you feel? You're gloating about it. There are parents in India who live in humble surroundings, and their son goes to the United States, makes a lot of money. You should see the father. He may not even have a car. He talks about the son. He has a 7-bedroom house. He has fancy cars. So on and so forth. He's gloating over it. And the poor man hasn't even experienced it. So your happiness multiplies. Identify with the country and your happiness multiplies. What's the population of this country? Huh? 70 million. You identify with the country, your happiness increases by 70 billion times. We are at a distinct advantage. I identify with India straight away 1.4 billion times. But I'm not joking, it's true. So, and identify with spirit, there's complete oneness. No separateness at all. So, and the rewards are enormous. You know, you feel one with your colleagues at work. And they return the courtesy. They also feel one for you. And it's a wonderful team of people who feel one and they're differently skilled. When we were young, when the summer vacations came, there was only one place we went to. You know which place it was? Huh? Granny's place, yes. Year after year, we went to the same grandmother's house. Year after year, we were so excited going there. And the highlight of our summer vacations was papad making. Huh? So, you know what would happen? It's a tedious process. So the grandmother would get the larger community together, and there would be like 15, 20 women making papad in an environment of fun, laughter, cheer, inclusiveness. All of us were included, including the children who had a very important job of taking the papad to the terrace, drying it and bringing it back. I'm thinking about it decades later. But when this oneness stopped, papad making stopped, and now we have to buy papad from the store. But that's not the point. That spirit of togetherness is gone completely. I'm not saying you should make papad, please. That's the least of the problems. But when you have this strong community spirit, it's such a pleasure. You have a wedding in the family, everyone will chip in. You have a death in the family, everyone will support you. This support system is so important. I know a lady who just now lost her husband in New Jersey. It's lonely, it's terrible. It is so difficult to meet with it. And the same thing happens in India. There is still that support system. So my appeal to you is get back that spirit. Relive that motto, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the whole world is one family. It doesn't matter what differences there are. Yes, the color of the skin may be different, the language may be different, the religion you follow may be different. What does it matter? We're all human beings. This inclusiveness was the spirit of India. This is what makes India what it is. It's not the food we eat or the language you speak or the clothes you wear that matters that much. And Indians who are living outside focus only on that. Everywhere you go, you see Gujarati lessons, Hindi lessons, Indian food being promoted. I mean, I'm not saying you should not do that. But the crux of Indianness is the feeling of oneness. So please live it and see what an outstanding person you will grow into. So the take-home points for today are, we looked at the past versus the present. We saw that attachment is the problem in all our situations. And how can we get detached? Attached to the higher. And incidentally, attachment and detachment is not physical. It's a mental state. And what must we do? Focus on duties and not rights. And see the spirit and all. Thank you. Do we have a little time for questions? Yeah. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But in the meanwhile, this is my first lecture in London. I'm going to be in London till next Wednesday. And I leave for India on Thursday. So after this, take a look at our books counter. I'll be there. And if you want to know about the schedule, you can visit our website, vedantavision.org, or I can give you the places where I'm lecturing. Please do come to any of the others or all of the others. They're all in different parts of London. Don't say it's far. I've come from thousands of miles away.